What is the outlook for the United States agricultural sector economically in the year 2026? That's what we're digging into with these awesome guests from Ag America in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture, a question for you about the aspirations you have for your business within agriculture. Do you have capital requirements, but you're not exactly fitting within the template of the local bank? No problem. Harvest Returns can help you get the funding you need to expand and grow your agricultural business. Chris Rowley assembled 18,000 investors, and with their money, does creating financing options to help you grow and expand. Maybe you're a specialty meat processing business, or you're in a mushroom business, or anything in between. Harvest Returns can help. Go to harvestreturns.com. That's www.harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get the money you need to grow your agricultural operation today. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I have Shelby Bass and Curt Covington with Ag America, formerly Ag America Lending. You can call them Ag America, Ag America Lending. The main thing is you just need to call them when you need to borrow money. But the point here is we're talking about this, a 26-page document that they are releasing on February 9th called the 2026 U.S. Agricultural Economy Outlook. It's brilliant. It's got a lot of stuff. It gives a little reference to what happened in 2025. It also looks ahead to 2026. Roughly the categories are going to be the stats, the recap of 2025's economy, trade tariffs, one big beautiful bill, the government shutdown, and then the farm economy and financial conditions as they sit right now, the regulatory and legislative shifts in farm policy that we're seeing, and then the trade and global market reality. Then we look to 2026. What does all this mean? So again, February 9th is the week that this show releases. It's also the week that their report, the 2026 U.S. Agricultural Economy Outlook report, comes out. You can check this out, and we're going to tell you where to find it. But what you're going to do right now is you're going to hear from Curt and Shelby. Curt's been a friend of the show. He's been on here at least 2 times, I think 3 times in the past. The last episode, we talked about the reality of farm bankruptcies. I got some hate mail over that because I had people say, okay, maybe the farm bankruptcy rate isn't that great, Damian, but you know what? A lot of people are exiting the business. I'm like, I understand that. We have been losing farms in the United States of America for 90 years. 1935, we had 6.8 million farms in the United States of America. We have been losing farming operations since 1935, almost a century ago. This pace will probably hasten because generally when the ag economy turns down, consolidations happen, older people decide, you know what, it's time to exit, which Curt and I would both agree. Usually those people make that decision 3 years past when they should have made that decision, but that's what's happening right now. So recap on 2025 and then all the other stuff that we just talked about, legislative, regulatory, trade, etc., and where we're going with this farm economy in 2026. Shelby, you and I reached out. You got this report coming. Then we're going to get to the big gun, Curt. So what did I miss in previewing the agricultural outlook for 2026?
Well, a lot of that is an accumulation of data, but more importantly, context, because you got to have context to the data and then also perspective. Ag America has kind of a unique lens that we see operations all across the United States. So obviously, there's a lot more variation than just the simple numbers state. Like a 41% increase in net farm income from 2024 to 2025 sounds great, but it's a little bit more of a bigger picture than that when you dig into the numbers. So that's what we kind of try to do with the 2025 review, and then dig into what that means for 2026.
Okay, so let's start off right with that one right there. In 2025, Curt Covington, our incomes actually went up. Net farm income, per your analysis, 179, just shy of $180 billion. That number doesn't sound bad. I remember when we hit like $160 billion several years ago, it was like, woohoo, bring out the party streamers. By God, this is good. But our costs of inputs were up tremendously, and we still saw financial stress. So why don't you start off with the recap on 2025 financials? $180 billion of net farm income doesn't sound all that bad. What does the number not tell us?
So if you scrape away farm subsidy, you scrape away disaster relief, and then you scrape out one sector that had a pretty good year, had a couple of pretty good years, and that's the cattle sector. You break it down just into the traditional farming sector, and you're going to find out very quickly that those farmers are struggling. Those sectors are struggling, and quite honestly, I can't think of perhaps one or two out of all the probably 20 major sectors across agriculture and the 200 different crops that are being farmed, I can't think but a handful that might be doing okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and by the way, so you and I are on about the bankruptcy situation. We're going to get to that in a little bit because of where things are going. But in terms of the sectors, it's not usual that everything in ag is tanking. I mean, there was a time when, and right now, most things are a struggle unless it's attached to a cow. Really, that's the one place. And I mean, especially crops not even doing well, right?
Right, that's correct. So, I mean, honestly, if California was always the place to be a lender until about 2 years ago. And I can always remember working with lenders from outside the California market would say, well, that's the market we want to be in. You ask them today, and now it's the market we want to be out of. The specialty crop sector has really struggled, and a lot of that struggle has to do with the continued what I would consider the heightened input costs. Most assuredly, the majority of that is labor. Most of those specialty crops have a large labor component to it. And that's, interest rates can go down. The cost of oil can go down. I can tell you the cost of labor in California is not ever going down. If anything, it's going to continue to rise. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate side of it.
Yeah, so it tends to be a regulatory and a labor regulation and cost of labor in California, which and the people that are saying, I've heard that it is because of the law, and it also is because of the cost of living, because obviously everything's expensive, and it is because of government spend. Ronald Reagan pointed out a long time ago, inflation really has to do with inflation and high prices for the consumer boil down to government spending. It's not because the consumer did anything wrong, and that's California in a nutshell. Everything's expensive in California, energy prices, etc., and it's because California has perpetuated that. I mean, we don't get overtly political in this show, but let's face it, that's what the problem is. So if you talk about production in California, there's water and there's regulation and there's labor, and that's the three big headaches for the producer.
And a lot of that's trickling over to other Western states. And when 60 to 70% of your population lives in Los Angeles, San Francisco, for that matter, Phoenix, for that matter, Portland, Seattle, all the decisions politically get made in those communities, and those communities all see farmers as bad stewards of their assets. Mm-hmm. We'd be just as happy if farmers went away and somebody else produced it, which then becomes a national security risk, which would be a whole nother discussion on your show.
Yeah, so that's one thing. My friend Walt Duflock, who's in my Business of Ag Success group, something, by the way, if you're listening to this, you should join. Every 2 weeks we get together and have calls and talk about issues impacting it. And he's got slides pointing out the move to Peru. The amount of agriculture that has left the Golden State and gone to Peru, and it is staggering, the rapid increase in produce production. And when you think about that, it's one thing to say, well, how can they produce stuff in California and get it to the people in Ohio affordably? How the hell can you do it from Peru? I'm not.
Well, I used to live there. And I was involved. I used to live in Ica Valley. Anybody that's actually been to Peru can tell you Ica Valley would be kind of similar to the Central Valley of California. One of the things that Peru has is an exact Mediterranean climate similar to California. One of the things they didn't have for a long period of time, and it's still pretty much true today, is their capital markets make it really difficult for the average everyday farmer down there to get capital to farm their seasonal crops. And the other big issue has always been infrastructure. It's one thing to grow a crop, it's another thing to get it offshore. All that's beginning to change, and Peru is at some point could be a major challenge to Western agriculture. I'll say this, they do a hell of a job growing crops down there, and they can grow almost everything that the Western U.S. grows. But again, I think a lot of that, and I would say this to anybody that's down there, it used to be, that you would have these, a little bit of political turmoil, but they would have these soft coups, right? They would walk in and say to the president of Peru, hey, I think it's time for you to leave, and we've got someone else to replace you. Why don't you go out and play golf? It's gotten a little more aggressive than that down there. So the last thing I would say in regard to that, at least from my perspective, if you look at what's being grown in Peru, guess who started all that? Western.
Yeah, American producers went there and set up a satellite operation, and to their credit, they were doing that to avoid the cost and the regulatory environment, probably in California.
And in addition to that, when Walmart says, I want avocados year round, you better have a way to provide them year round. So it's, you name it, whether it's table grapes, tree fruit, whether it's avocados, it doesn't make any difference. There's a lot of U.S. producers down there that are shipping off season into the United States. But Peru is formidable, as is Chile.
Yeah, it's Chile. All right, we're talking about specialty crop here. Let's get back to the agricultural economy. Shelby, I want you to hit on this. 44 billion of that 180, 23% of the farm revenue in 2025 was thanks to the taxpayer of the United States of America. I do tell my farmer audiences, sometimes they don't like to hear it, but you know what? There's just a thing called truth, and I'm out here giving you marketplace analysis and outlook. If you ate today, thank a farmer. And I say, if you farmed it today, thank a taxpayer. That's really what we need to say, because we're in this situation, and we weren't there in 22-3 because the record farm incomes. We're back there. And I believe historically, we've been in a situation for a long time. And I'm going back to when I was a kid, by the 80s, about a quarter of farm income was thanks to the taxpayer of the United States of America. I don't know if that's going to have staying power. I've got some reasons why I think that it won't. But what do I need to know about that number?
No, that's a really good point. I think it's making people remember the 80s and that $40 billion threshold of farm income being government payments. So it creeping up to being a quarter of farm income. I mean, from 2024 to 2025, that was a triple digit increase. That was a 301% increase. So why most of that is supplemental ad hoc assistant. That ad hoc assistance is supposed to be a safety net for producers. But it's really starting to become, and you guys kind of were more around in the 80s to see it, but it's becoming more of like an operational part of their operational plan, part of their financial plan to rely on that. So, I think that is an honest look that producers should look at of do you want to be relying on Washington to make ends meet, or what plans or what adjustments can be made from a financial perspective to where you're sort of offsetting that risk a little bit. So we do focus a lot on that in this report.
Okay, well, you're obviously a lender, and Curt, you can chime in here anytime you want. You're looking at the numbers to loan money to a farming operation. And if you say, well, you can't cash flow given these way things are, but we know you're probably going to have another $400,000 come in from government assistance. Then all of a sudden it absolutely changes everything. And when you're a lender, how do we not admit that this is probably the reality? Because it has been. I mean, really, since 1987, the government has not allowed the massive amounts of bankruptcies through various programs, and it's a reality. Farm people don't like to admit it, but this is not a new thing. We've been doing this for a long while, where we step in, policy steps in and props up the operation. And you guys as lenders, there's no way that you don't look at this and say, yeah, well, it probably makes sense as long as the government money's coming in.
Well, it is. And I think it's a short-term solution that we keep thinking it's going to be a long-term. But I think we get this short-term solution and then we kind of pump the brakes on adaptation and figuring out how to make your operation more resilient. You kind of pump the brakes on that because the cash is coming in. But I think we encourage, even though that's what's happening right now, I think you need to look long term too and try and find a way outside of that in the long term and not just keep relying on it, if that makes sense. Curt could probably speak to it too.
Look, I have a more jaundiced view of all this stuff, right? I mean, let's face it, the only thing that has kept what I would call less efficient farmers in business has been government subsidy programs, without question. And the whole idea was you can't lose the family farm. I understand that. The reality of the matter is many of the largest farming operations in the United States are still owned by families, okay? So it's kind of that argument that I hear that we're losing family farms. No, family farms, the ones that are successful, the ones that do a really good job of controlling their costs, thrive. And it results in consolidation of the less successful farmers who, without that subsidy payment, would have been gone decades ago. And so I'm probably a contrarian when it comes to this. I grew up in rural America. My family still farms in rural America. But the reality of the matter is, when you look around my neighborhood, the consolidation has already taken place. But there's more consolidation that's going to take place at some point, simply because government programs cannot be a sustainable source of cash flow to any lender. And honestly, and when you start adding in some of these ad hoc things, you start adding in some of these disaster payments, it distorts the actual average revenue that farmer generates. And when you start sorting all this out and you start kind of scraping off the non-recurring sources of capital that come into these farm operations, you're going to look at it and go, wow, no wonder this guy's in trouble. No wonder they're in trouble. It's not sustainable. And so for me, and again, I hate to be so direct and blunt, the reality of the matter is the farm, rural America is changing, and consolidation is a path to the future. And the reason it's a path to the future is because all the buyers on the other end, the Walmarts, the Costcos, the Krogers, you name them, they're all consolidating. And so this is going to be something that we as Americans are going to have to get used to, and continuing to subsidize the lower performing, lower quartile, if you want to call them, farmers in rural America is just not logical anymore. And again, I hate saying that because I grew up with a lot of them that aren't there anymore. But the reality of the matter is, at some point, you got to rip off the Band-Aid.
Okay, so I just had an episode with younger farming operations, and they were talking about the struggle in cash flow and the but to be profitable, et cetera, and but this has always been a high capital, low margin business. It just has been, and I mean, it's not at a very specialized level. Had a guy on here that does 5 acres of specialty crop direct to consumer, and there's room for that, but that's still also never going to be the bulk of the product, right? We're still going to have more than 50%, more than 80% of what is consumed from Walmart, Costco, Kroger, the stores you just named, are not raised by someone with 2 acres, and it's just unfortunate it's the way things are because of sheer quantity. But to
your point, this is a very, very, very bifurcated business. For example, if you're a small dairy farmer and you're milking 200 cows and you're producing your own cheese, or you're doing farmstead, whatever,
yep,
and part of it is agritourism, and you don't have much debt on your property, you're probably going to be okay. You go to the farmer's market, you sell, fresh grade A milk, or you're selling cheese or yogurt or whatever it is, your ice cream, I don't care, whatever it is you're producing, you're probably going to do okay. Good margins, no volume. The other end of it are the ones that are the cash flow generators, right? They're the larger operations. They're completely focused on cash flow, and they're able to service their debt. And those two models work in our farm economy. It's everybody else in the middle that hasn't gone left or hasn't gone right that's going to get squeezed out. And that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, so that's, and I said that a long time ago. I shot a video on my farmstead, and I said I think it's the middle where the problem is. And yeah, we got the consumer, or the activist groups are going to say factory farm, industrial agriculture. Well, we can call it what you will, but larger scale is going to capitalize economies of scale. They're going to work better arrangements. And if I'm looking at your agricultural economic outlook here that Ag America puts out, let's face it, if I'm a 12,000 acre row crop operator, I'm probably going to be buying things at a better rate than if I'm only farming 1,200 acres. and I get more attention from the equipment companies, and I can probably play them against each other. So again, it goes back to that margin thing. One of your one of your points in here, I want to get to that also, about the profitability, said that 52% of farms were profitable in 2025. And I want to get into whether we see that happening in 2026. But to your point, I have said the same thing. It's funny to call a 200 cow farm, dairy farm, a smaller operation, but that's where we are. But yes, the small that has a specialization, or the big that's just a pure commodity player, is probably where we are. I do think the middle gets squeezed. I think that there's compelling evidence that's going to happen. So 52% of farms were profitable in 2025. Are we going to be there? Are we going to be better than that in 26? Shelby, you go.
That is the $1 million question. I think essentially in this report, we get into the meat of it. But we see a marginal squeeze that you can see talked about across the industry. And we anticipate that will continue in 2026. Now, the big caveat is this farm aid package that's being discussed in Washington right now. And so we have a new farm income forecast report coming out Thursday. It should be out by the time this is put out. But it'll be interesting to see what that says, because I wouldn't honestly be surprised if it says farm income is going up, because you're seeing, anticipated commodity program payments go up. You're seeing these ad hoc payments go up. So I'd be really interested to look into the deeper numbers, because the surface level numbers will very possibly say that it's going up. But, farm income, we're expecting there to be tighter credit conditions in 2026.
Yeah, and I want to hear, because when Curt said, he hates to say it, and we hate to admit this, but he says it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. So I want to find out if that's really going to happen. Before I do, I want to tell you about our friends over at Title Grow. If you've seen me speak on a stage, I talk a lot about the Asians of agriculture, words like innovation, information, regulation, inflation. Anyway, what about frustration? Frustration if you are a producer of paying for inputs that do not give you a payback. If you're looking for cutting-edge bio-based solutions that truly deliver measurable yield performance with a great return on your investment, you need to know about my friends over at Title Grow AgriScience. Title Grow AgriScience utilizes upcycled seafood byproducts to precisely formulate powerful plant nutrition and crop protection chemistry. That's right. It's seafood byproducts, not seaweed, seafood byproducts. It stinks, by the way. I did a plot for them last year. They opened up the barrel of Oceanic and C5. It stinks. It stinks like the silage juice that used to come out of the silo after we filled the silo on the dairy farm, mixed with rotten fish. It stinks. But you know what? We saw huge benefits in my trials that we did at De La Rosa Farms last year for Title Grow. Anyway, the products do not require you to reinvent the wheel. They integrate right into your existing production practices. You can optimize your current fertilizer and your crop protection programs by just adding this stuff in. It's about getting more of what you're already doing without the frustration. You want to learn more about this? Go to TitleGrowAg.com. Title, like a big bunch of water. Title. TIDAL. Grow, like what your kids do. TitleGrowAg.com. That's TitleGrowAg.com. Tell them Damian Mason sent you. You say it's time to rip off the bandage, and in this whole 26-page economic outlook that you guys are putting out, it doesn't say, oh, it's time to do this, but I think it does beg the question, is the American consumer, the American taxpayer, or the political class in Washington, D.C. going to continue to toss $44 billion? It looks like it's going to happen again this year. They're talking about $15 to $17 billion here in Q1. You think, Curt, eventually we can't keep doing this?
Yeah, so rural legislators are part of the problem. The idea being, not unlike urban legislators who get together with the rural legislators and say, oh, we need $1 trillion farm bill. And the reason we need $1 trillion farm bill is 70 cents of that goes to the SNAP program. So we want to make sure that the SNAP program is enhanced, and that people that need SNAP assistance will get it. Yep. And the rural legislators say, yeah, well, we've got our own SNAP program. It's called subsidy payments. It's called ad hoc market facilitation programs. Pick your poison. Doesn't really make any difference. Yep. The reality of the matter is it's all about serving your constituents in a lot of ways, in some of the most devious ways possible, in my humble opinion. And for me, here's the problem that you've got. You could look, I find this so interesting, and so maybe this doesn't answer the question, but it does for me. The average consumer that we talk about that needs to be able to pay for food for their family is going to shop at Walmart. Right? Yeah. They're going to go to Walmart and they're going to find the best prices. And I don't care whether it's bread, I don't care whether it's citrus, I don't care whether it's milk. That's where they're going to get their best prices. And how does Walmart provide the best prices for those products? They buy it through consolidated purchasing arrangements with large operators. It's called the DCA model. It's called, you can call it really whatever you want, but it's a model whereby they go to 2 or 3 major suppliers in the United States, maybe 4 or 5, depending on the commodity, and say, we want you to handle the Western United States or the Midwest or the Northeast or whatever it is with this product, and we want it delivered to our distribution centers, and we want to be able to mark this up to our consumers who walk into this store in rural America, in most cases, and get the most bang for their buck. Yet at the same time, we're sitting here complaining that farmers are getting subsidy payments by the wealthy who say, well, this isn't right because, these farmers don't deserve it, when in fact, the ones that benefit the most from it are the ones that are consuming the food from Walmart.
Yeah, right. So, well, that's been a thing for a long time. I mean, there I was at AgEcon 101 at Purdue University in 1988, and they talked about the policy of cheap food for the masses. And I said, well, cheap food at what cost? If the taxpayer is on the hook for, in last year's, $44 billion, again, that's not counting crop insurance and various other USDA programs, so $44 billion of just payments to the Farm Belt. And, of course, the professor said, well, Mr. Mason, what you got to understand is the people that are paying that $44 billion are not the lower end of the socioeconomic group that's likely to pick up pitchforks and storm the Bastille. By the way, that's a historic reference talking about the French Revolution. So if you're listening to the show, yes, I'm trying to always bring you along historically. That's a reference to the French Revolution. The point being is poor people who are hungry riot. Rich people pay the taxes that subsidize the poor. So what we've really done there is we've made it so that there's cheap food for the lower end consumer in terms of their economic situation. We still haven't fixed the farm economy. And then you've got to beg the question, does anybody care? We do. You do. Does anybody in D.C. care? I'm not sure that they do.
Well, I just got one thing left to say about this. You want to fix this problem about putting out billions of dollars? Number one, I think you have to, at this point, strip out SNAP from the Farm Bill. Whether that's Health and Human Services, wherever that goes, Finance Committee, I don't know where it goes. But if you just start stripping those kind of things out, then all of a sudden, the emperor, is undressed at that point. And people start saying, okay, well, now I can see exactly what goes to farmers. Now, how much of that money that's going to farmers actually goes to farmers? Very small percentage of it, like 15%. The rest of it goes to environmental causes in a lot of cases, which are considered farm-related subsidies. But the reality of the matter is, until such time, let me just say this. You asked the question, are taxpayers going to get tired of this? Taxpayers are not going to get tired of this because they don't even know how it works. And the rural legislators and the urban legislators have this whole thing dialed in. You give them a chance, this thing will go from where it is today, 10 years from now, it'll be a $2 trillion budget for this. And we'll all be sitting here saying, when is this going to come to an end? The reality of the matter is, never.
So you say it's time to rip off the Band-Aid. It's time to let there be an actual economic reality, and instead of the marketplace where we're, asking these guys to produce a bunch of commodities for which the demand is not as great as the supply, and then we subsidize it, and the beneficiary generally is either the consumer here, and also the consumer in China. It's ridiculous that the taxpayers in America are paying my neighbors in Indiana a subsidy to produce soybeans that can be then sold for less than the cost of production to China. So the taxpayers are really providing cheap soybeans for China to feed China's hogs.
Yep. I mean, ultimately, the issue is here is, I get somehow the emotional attachment to all of this in rural America, but the reality is as consolidation continues, Most of the ownership of farmland, most of the ownership of the operating assets are exiting rural America. That's a whole nother discussion.
Well, let's dig into that, because while we're talking about this agricultural economy outlook, we already said that what has usually happened in an agricultural downturn, then we see consolidation, we see growth of certain farming operations that are capitalized, that can get the money, et cetera, et cetera. So, Shelby, you can hop in on this one too if you like. This will be year 3. Really, it started a downturn at the end of 23. So really, 24 was a down year, 25 was a down year, 26. This is where the rubber's going to meet the road. There's going to be some people that just can't do it anymore. I think in the last episode that Curt and I did, we talked about some farming operations go to the lender of last resort, right? You know, maybe AgAmerica's not going to keep funneling money to them, but they find some operation, and then they're paying like 9 or 10 or 12%. And if you're paying double what prevailing interest rates are, unless you're mining gold, I don't know how in the hell, this could make any sense. So then this is the year where I think we are going to see more blood. And I don't wish that, but it's going to happen even with the government programs that are in place. So what do you see as a lender? What do we play out in this program, in this study?
Well, I think you're right. I think going back to the consolidation issue, I think there's a decision a lot of operators need to make in what path and what direction that they want to go if they want to stay in farming. And I think if we think about government payments, and you may disagree or agree on this, but I think when it comes, what would be maybe more beneficial for the government to focus on is maybe the concentration or the monopoly that you're seeing on an input supplier perspective, and how that is squeezing a farmer too. And kind of they're being squeezed on the input side, and they're being squeezed on the retail side. So if they want to, you say if Washington cares or not, the question to me is, if they care, that effort should be focused on making it a more competitive market, and not just giving taxpayer money to do that Band-Aid like Curt is saying. The Band-Aid does have to be ripped at one point, and it's up to the farmer to be ready for that. Be proactive in discussing options with their lender, making sure they have a trusted lender who's not going to over leverage them and put them in a tight financial spot, but is really going to look at the full picture, maybe provide somewhat of a short-term solution, but really giving that long-term strategy. And that's what we're trying to focus on, and that's what we really talk about in this report is, yep, there's these short-term solutions in place that are maybe going to hold the farm economy up, but let's get a long-term game plan together.
All right. So first off, we've always thought the trade, and I've covered this a whole bunch on my show here. Trade's not the silver bullet. It once was. We used to produce the hell out of stuff and stick it on a boat. It ain't going to work anymore, because we're not going to win the low-cost competitor price producer thing against South America. Also, the globe is oversupplied. We are at big surplus numbers. So you've got a section here about trade. What does your report say about trade? What should the people in ag, whether they farm or ancillary in the business, what should they know or think about when it comes to trade?
The thing, when I was looking at the numbers, and I've been following a lot of the news, it's really hard to keep up with all of the updates when it comes to trades, because there's a lot of noise out there right now. When you look at the numbers and the trade outlook, it is trending in the right direction as far as the deficit. It is lowering. The latest trade report said, I think, $37 billion deficit. Yeah,
we were projected to be on just ag trade, meaning if you're saying, Damian, help me understand this, meaning we used to sell more dollars worth of agricultural products to the globe than the globe shipped to us. 5 years ago, that began to change, and we have been in an agricultural trade deficit, and it's been growing. They thought 2025 was going to push to $50 billion, meaning we bought $50 billion more ag stuff than the world bought from us. It's been pared down. It's going to be under 40, but not by much. And then by next year, it's going to pare down a little bit again. So that's good, but we also...
Right, but with a caveat there. So it's trending in the right direction. Still not in a great place right now, but we're at least shrinking that deficit a little bit, as long as trade deals, there's follow through. So I think the big point with that, you saw China did buy the 12 million tons of soybeans that was agreed in 2025. I think it's 2020 or 2025 5 million tons of soybeans agreed upon in 2026 and 2027. That remains to be seen. They slowed purchases, and as far as I know, are purchasing back from South America right now, and they've slowed purchase from
I
U.S.
find it remarkable. I just want to go to trade and Curt, because he's more my drinking buddy, that we kind of both we sometimes end up sounding alike. I've had to hear about China and soybeans like at least 20% of the discussion. I'm so goddamn tired of hearing about it. First off, I keep pointing out, what do you not get? They are moving away from us. They do not require the number of soybeans because their population is in decline. The fertility rate, by the way, in China, new numbers, 0.93.
Yeah.
It takes 2.1 babies per woman to keep at break even on your population. They're less than half of that. They are getting rid of sows. They will have removed as many sows between 2020 and today as the entire U.S. herd of sows. So dead sows don't eat soybeans, nor do the 27 piglets per year that dead sows don't have. I just find it remarkable that we still have this thing. And I'm not being mean here, Shelby, but just saying, you're like the 44th person in the last 2 weeks I've had to hear talk about, well, trying to go buy some soybeans. Neat, wonderful, great. This is not a long. It'd be like if I came to your bank and you said, well, how are you going to repay this loan? Well, I've got my little kid's coin purse, and I'm gonna go and steal out of there. I'm gonna pay him. And you're like, that's your answer? What are you, stupid? If your answer is, well, China's gonna buy some soybeans, that's not. There's no long term to that. I am convinced.
You're right, and that's the surface level discussion. And so I think the optimist in me, the part of me that is hopeful with trade, is a diversification of markets. You're seeing trade come with El Salvador, Malaysia, Switzerland, Guatemala. You're seeing these trade deals emerge outside of China, which to me is good news, but it's follow through. Execution is going to be key.
By the way,
so trade deals aren't guarantees.
Shelby, didn't Trump threaten Switzerland when he was over in Europe last week and said, you send your watches over there to America, you need to buy our stuff? I'm like,
well, in Korea too. Korea just got threatened with another tariff hike. So that's what I mean, is these threats are trying to create follow through. And then you also have the idea of the tariff legalities that are kind of in limbo right now with the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of what ifs with trade right now.
I thought it was neat, the Switzerland thing, to call that a trade win. I believe the population of Switzerland is just a tick under the population of Indiana. So it'd be like cheering that we struck a trade deal with Indiana. All right. Curt, let's go through here rapid fire. I want to get more from you. Trade, and then, all right, you believe the commodity programs are going to stay in place because as long as 95-year-old Chuck Grassley can still talk about Iowa, he's going to make it. So you don't think the Band-Aid gets ripped off in 2026 in your agriculture outlook? You think we're going to be going to the government and asking for another $15 billion, another $12 billion, and whatever the bullshit is, and you think the money train continues out of D.C. in 26?
Without question. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Which means we will see some consolidation. We will see some farmers exiting, but they will not do so in a tremendously volatile bankruptcy manner. They will do so just because they don't get re-upped. They go to AgAmerica or Rabobank or Farm Credit or whatever, their local lender, whoever it is, and they say, you know what, Roy, I think it's really just time that you kind of let the neighbor rent your farm ground.
Yeah, and I would just add this, is that if you talk to any operating lender today out in rural America, and I'm not talking about Rabobank, I'm not talking about Bank of Montreal, I'm not talking about the large farm credits, I'm talking about the rural community banks. You know what they're going to tell you if you walk in and ask, you're new to the bank, you're looking for a line of credit to farm on, and you're saying, hey, what are you going to farm? I'm going to farm corn and beans just like everybody else is. They'll say, you know what, we got enough problems on our books right now. We're just trying to keep the ship steady. So access to capital in rural America is going to be a problem right now. I mean, I'm not talking about 2026 come later in the year. Right now, farmers are not getting lines of credit renewed at the same pace that they were, because these lenders are looking at this and they're simply saying, I'm not sure this farm is viable at 375 corn.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I think Shelby's still mad because I went off about the China soybean thing. She's saying,
I can never be mad at you, Damian.
I know you can't be. You and me. I tell you what. I'm to the point where I've heard if China and soybean It's like almost like one of those word find things. I'm like, oh my God, not again. So
I'm sick of it too. I read about it every day.
Oh, every day, every day. And every old fossil ag commodities person has been saying the same thing: China soybean, since like the year 2003, when the juggernaut began, or 24 years ago, whatever hell it's been. That they can't change their way. They're like, that's all they know to go to is that China soybean. So anyway, what happens? Then the bank says we can't re-up you. Then they don't go. They're not going to probably go bankrupt. But then they just try and exit. They just say, okay, we're going to shut down the barn.
No, what they typically do then is they'll go seek input suppliers that are silly enough to give them a line of credit for $1.5 million or whatever the number that they need, and then that input supplier will find that they're going to have a carryover loan come the end of the season when they don't have enough crop income to pay them back. Then they end up going to a different hard money lender that will finance their 2027 crop, yet they'll still have a hangover from their 2026 crop, and that lender will try and find a way to get paid back. And you have this slow drip of problems. And then what happens is eventually they're forced into a position where they have to either rent the property out or sell it.
That probably happens.
Or a combination of both.
Sure. So 2026, we won't see a mass exodus. We're still going to, in year 3, and that's what Shelby was talking about also, we probably will still, first off, does the ag economy improve in 26? No. We think it remains roughly the same. Is that what I heard, Shelby? Or maybe up a little?
About the same.
About the same. And then there will still be, Curt says, and you agree, the government's still going to continue to flow money out here through ad hoc payments and whatever USDA programs and trade whatever. Okay, and then farmers do exit some. We see a decline, not in a volatile manner, but we do see some exiting the business. We all three agree on that.
I think it's like 75% of lenders expect retirements to increase this year.
Yeah. And how significant is that? Does that mean the production goes down? No. I mean, I've had people that don't understand agriculture, and I say, no, someone else just picks up that production. If they get rid of their 200 cows, then the place down the road that's milking 2,000 cows just grabs them or increases their own production, whatever. So we don't see any supply going down, do we?
No.
I mean, we are seeing it with the cattle herds, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, right. The beef thing. All right. I want to get into our other predictions that are made in this thing, and I want to go rapid fire on that. By the way, if you're looking for a real...
I've got a good one for you.
I want to hear your predictions. Let me get through my commercial for Nano Yield. Nano Yield's a company based out of here in the United States of America. Their products are all made here in the United States of America, and they came up to become a sponsor for me for the year 2026. They've been a client of mine. They put me on stage at one of their dealer events, and I said, you know what? You ought to talk to my people out here that listen to the Business of Agriculture show. So I want you to know about their products like Nano Pro. Patented mineral-based nanoparticles go in your spray tank at just 4 ounces per acre and act as a delivery system for your entire tank mix. We're talking about you run across your field with your spray rig, you're putting 4 ounces in there, and it makes the stuff that's in your spray rig hotter, makes it more effective. So in other words, using nanotechnology, you're taking the products you already pay for and making them a lot better, more absorbed in the plant, etc. Once growers see this work in the field, they do not spray without it. They put the Nano Yield products into the spray tank from there on. It's like an insurance for your crop inputs. Nano Yield is a family-owned company. You can learn more at Nano Yield's website, nano, N-A-N-O, hyphen, yield, like the sign, nano-yield.com. Check out their grower testimonials on YouTube. Check out nanoyield.com. All right. Big predictions. Go ahead. Curt was ready to go. He was jumping the gun. What's your big predictions?
I think the U.S. government will come up with a permanent land set aside where it will force down the number of farmable acres. And what will end up happening is it'll actually create the opposite effect. And what will happen is farmers will put their worst ground into a permanent set aside.
You don't mean like a 10-year, not like the CRP 10-year or 15. You think it's going to go like 30 or more.
Yeah, probably, let's just go off the deep end here and probably deed that property to the federal government who can't do anything with it other than it just sits there forever. And then what will happen is you'll find that the most productive farm ground, after they get paid a lot of money, by the way, for that set-aside program. They'll go in partnership, silent partnership with another farmer, and they'll still be back in the business. And on top of that, as production gains occur in corn, in bean, seed technology, and instead of 200 bushels to the acre on average, you're going to be at 350 bushels to the acre. I'll probably be dead by then, but I don't care. The reality of the matter is it will never solve the problem. It'll just be billions of dollars that left the taxpayer's pocket. And it all sounds good, looks good, and won't work.
It does enhance conservation, like the 23 or 26 million acres that are in Conservation Reserve Program right now. And you could argue that we protected some watersheds by keeping sediment out of them, but really some of those practices should have been done anyhow. But I agree with you. I said that there's going to be a reduction in acres through a federal program, much like CRP, and it will be in an effort to bring down supply. But as you stated, if I take my 20% worst acres out of production and I just now apply my diligence to my good acres, we haven't lowered the supply at all, and that's probably what you're talking about.
And they tried that with the dairy industry. The first time around when they did the dairy retirement program, they didn't stop farmers from getting back in the business. They only had to be out, I think, 3 to 5 years. I don't recall what it was, but it may have been less than that. And then they realized the way to fix that problem, and it still didn't work because production per cow went up, 20-25% after. What they found was, well, the way to really get everybody on the hook here is force the dairy industry to actually pay for that permanent set-aside program. So when you see the government's going to say, oh, well, but it's a cost sharing. We're going to make the grain industry pay for some of this.
Yeah, so, well, I don't know if that'll happen. I mean, like all of a sudden we go to Cargill or Archer Daniel Midland and say, you need to come up with money to pay to reduce supply. And they're going to say, why the hell would I want to be?
It might be farm groups. It could be a checkoff. Hey, they do that in the potato sector.
Yeah,
that's what happens in the cannery tomato and potato sector.
So one of your predictions is there will be this federal program to get rid of supply by getting rid of acres, and by doing that, we'll get rid of the worser acres. That's not really a word. I know that Shelby's saying, wait a minute, he doesn't really think worser is a word, does he? We'll get rid of the worser acres, and then when we do that, we might even not do it with taxpayer dollars. We probably will, but then we also might try and get the grain handlers to be on the hook. My God, imagine if we could figure out a way to soak the packers also. This would have the farm people. This would have the farm people just giddy. They'd be driving around on their Twitter feeds just being giddy that they're getting money from the big four packers and the big four grain handlers. I see part of that happening for sure. All right, Shelby, big prediction from you. Give it to me.
Well, Damian, I don't have a crystal ball. It's hard to say as far as prediction. So what I'm mainly focused on is what farmers and producers can control in their operations right now. And that is being proactive and finding strength through their strategy. So the people that I think that are going to succeed and go through this downturn are the ones that have close relationships with their trusted lender, the ones who can reach out to their lender and tell them what's going on, and they can adapt their plan. The ones that are going to adapt is going to be huge. The ones that are going to think outside of the box and innovate, even if they're getting taxpayer dollars, even if they're getting programmed, even if their bottom line looks okay, they're still looking for ways to cut costs. And they're also planning ahead for succession. I think that is, my personal passion as a young farmer, hoping to still have an industry to farm in, is that people plan for ways young farmers can still take on the business and keep farming. They're taking on the risk, but they need to find a way to jump in and also be able to be in the finances of it as well.
Okay, so the big question then, are we going to end up with, like my guests on the most recent episode of this show wanted to call for different sort of regulation and legislation that favors young producers? And I said, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, in a way, it's kind of, it started to with the One Big Beautiful Bill. There were a few different legislations they extended for beginning farmers that they now have a little bit more access to these crop insurance programs, and they have more opportunity to overlay. So some of that is beginning to happen, but I think what I mean to say is that with these older producers of, younger producers rely on older producers' expertise. We still have good ideas and we still bring innovation to the table. Things like e-commerce, things that older producers, it's a whole new world for them and sometimes are resistant to because they've done things the way that they've always been done. But I think if people talk more, and that's probably just in general with our climate now, instead of immediately being like, you're wrong and I'm right and this is why. I think young producers need to be connected to older producers. The operations that are succeeding, like Curt said, the ones that are consolidating and buying up that land and increasing their production, they need to be having a successor in mind in place to kind of take under their wing and say, hey, this is what I'm doing that's working, and figuring that out and kind of sharing that knowledge.
Curt, do you see anything? Thank you, Shelby. Do you see anything on, she's talking generational, and let's talk about the really big problem we have, and that's supply. Do you see any way that we actually address this through supply management, which I've said is a possibility, or do we finally, do we set quotas? Is there some... Soybeans are where they are price-wise. Commodities are where they are price-wise because we have a global glut. And right now, if we say we'll decrease production, well, then Brazil probably increases. So there's the argument, why would we ever decrease? Because then we, from a national security standpoint, we just cede all those acres and all that productivity to a South American country. But at some point, we just got too much stuff. Does that ever change? Is that going to change in 26?
No. We got too much stuff. That's the way it's like the store. It's like when you go over in a storage facility, you go, oh man, this is perfect size for what I need. You go back 6 months later, you can't even open the door without everything falling out. So there is just too much supply. And the reality of the matter is you can't trust your neighbor. You literally cannot trust your trade partners in any of this. You can't.
So, I mean, the idea is
right now, because whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, what you're finding out is your true friends simply look at this and say, well, tit for tat, perfect, no problem. We'll just go to China directly and cut a deal with them. So you somehow think that you're going to get your foreign trade partners to cooperate with you on some long-term scheme, as they would call it in other countries. It's a scheme.
Yeah.
I just think it's tomfoolery.
Yeah, because what they'll look out for their own self-interest and their own opportunity to move the ball downfield for themselves, for their own economy. Yeah. I've said that we're going to have some more protectionism. Shelby, you talked about the benefit of trade, and I said we better realize that we're going to be more into a protectionist trade policy. Europe has been for decades. This idea that the Europeans are mad at us, I'm like, boo-hoo. You know what? You've had protectionist trade policies for decades that favored the European Union versus the United States. They formed the European Union explicitly to be a competitor to the United States. When stuff is easily produced and mature economies don't want to give back, they become more protectionist. Do you agree with me that we're going to see more protectionist economic policy all over trade policy all over the world?
All over the world outside of the U.S.? What the US
Other countries are going to look out for their own interest, and they're going to do what they can, and then they're going to say, and by the way, this is the first time ever that they've said, we were at $1 trillion of trade deficit last year, not just ag, everything, and so every other country was fine letting us just let them use us and abuse us as you will. I think that they're going to become even more protectionist because we're starting to play a little bit harder ball.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. What's your last thoughts on this? You don't have a crystal ball. One of the big talking points here that I liked is then when you talked about these farmers coming in there, what's your last piece of advice? So the farmer comes in here or a small agricultural business said, man, things are kind of tight out here. So what do you tell them?
I'd say don't focus on the farm program payments. Focus on creativity and innovation and adapting. So you said that there's a glut with grains and soybeans. Call me crazy, but what if we focus on diversification of those operations? Mm-hmm. I know that would mean maybe not qualifying for the commodity programs or things, but I think that we need to do something a little bit differently if we're wanting to rip this Band-Aid off and we're wanting to lower our reliance on government subsidies to keep these operations afloat.
as long as I qualify for a bunch of government payments, there's not a tremendous amount of motivation because behavior is dictated by the incentive, right? But
until it gets taken away, and then you're already in a tight spot.
Curt, what is your thing? I come and sit down at your desk, or you come to my business office on my farming operation, whatever it should be, from arugula to corn to whatever. What are you going to tell me?
Well, there's a big difference between arugula and corn, but I
gotta be honest with you. I always use arugula as my sort of funny example. I don't even know what it is. I mean, if you put an arugula,
it's delicious. I love arugula.
What is it?
It is. It's great on eggs.
Well, see, you're in Florida, so you probably have this stuff. I'm not sure if you put an arugula on my desk, I would even know what the hell it is. It'd be like a science lab.
Look, I've heard this argument, diversification. Diversification works in certain geographies of the United States. Certain geographies, it doesn't work. You're either going to be married to corn and beans or you're going to be married to corn and beans.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be married to fallow ground, right? You could make that argument out west, right? You could make that argument in the south that, okay, diversification works. Let me tell you how some farmers have dealt with diversification. You know what they've done? They still farm their crops. Then they've made investments in some of these private equity firms that are farming other crops. And they say, well, hey, if I can get a good dividend over here farming a crop I can't farm here, I can still get a decent return. The reality of the matter is someone comes to my desk and they have had losses 2 out of the last 3 years. I'm going to tell them I cannot help you. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I cannot help you. That's one form of pulling off or ripping off the I cannot help you. Now, if they think they can go get assistance from the USDA through the FSA guaranteed loan program, great. If they think if I can help them find another lender out there that might be sympathetic or empathetic to their situation and help them out, perfect. That's not for me. I'm not in the business.
Yeah.
And most lenders, and I'm not just speaking for myself, are not in the business of helping a farmer that can't help themselves. If you've had losses 2 out of the last 3 years, while perhaps other farmers have done okay, it's more about you than it is about the commodity.
Yeah. So, by the way, that's like some hard medicine right there, Shelby. He's being a little bit of a hard ass, but also accurate.
He's the bad cop. I'm the good cop.
Exactly. All right. So let's last thought here. And this is where I'm going to do another episode about cyclical versus structural, because I have people that truly, and I'm not being mean, but they say, Damian, just make sure you throw some humor into your presentation when you speak at our event. And obviously I can do that. I used to be a comedy guy. And they said, until we get through this, and I said, get through it. So your report here, kids, is for the year 2026. Curt just said there's going to still be the government payments. We're still going to be relying on government payments, and we're still going to be oversupplied. And even if there's big mass programs to take 50 million acres out of production, and people are like, what the hell, 50 million acres? I could see it being that big, and I can also see it not even mattering, just to your point, in terms of moving the balance sheet, in terms of the carryover and the supply, etc. I don't see this getting better in 2026 or 2027 or 2028. And the idea that this is going to be a few-year lull, it boils down to a complete glut of just about everything and a consumption that's is at record high, but it's also not climbing. And also the Perus or the Chiles or the Brazils or the Kazakhstans or the Australias of the world want to be on this game of production also. I don't see this. I don't see a lot of, and I agree on diversification of investment, but in terms of cropping, go to my friends in Sherman County, Oregon, and tell them to grow something besides wheat. And they're going to say, we can't.
Right. So I mean, ultimately the bottom line is here, if you don't like the medicine here in the United States, maybe you can diversify by going to someplace less desirable, but you could farm 400 or 500 acres in that less desirable place. And I could think of a few of them, but the reality of the matter is, you get to those less desirable places, you're not going to be able to find financing down there. I don't finance anybody outside the United States. Yeah. And the question always shows up, well, why don't you finance somebody down in Peru or Chile? And the answer is real simple, because it's not British law. That's the answer you give them.
Yeah, so the grass isn't really any greener anywhere else than here, and frankly, the grass isn't all that green here, which is not the way we would definitely. We don't like to have these downers, Shelby, but we got some realities upon us, and I guess what I'm hearing here is the 2026 U.S. agricultural economy outlook. It's not bleak to the point where we're all need to go and jump off a bridge, but it's also this ain't a rosy picture.
It's at an inflection point.
Yeah, so to her point, that's correct. But I would also say all this seems to happen. It's a very chunky process, for the lack of a better word, right? Things click along for a decade. Then, pardon the French, shit hits the fan, right? Yep. And then you have this adjustment. In some periods of time, that adjustment took place fairly quickly. 14, some sectors, maybe it fixes itself in a year or 2 years. But this is a long-term issue. This is a systematic issue. This is not just a single commodity that's in trouble. This is a systematic issue. And there is no grand solution for any of it other than consolidation and accepting lower prices, which as a farmer means you have to be better at controlling your costs. And as a result of that, consolidation will continue to happen. And the government eventually is going to step in as part of that process.
Last question. Will inputs from machinery, we know diesel's coming down because we are taking over countries like Venezuela, so we think that's good for fossil fuel, but will inputs of crop inputs and the other costs come down? I unfortunately, I don't think that they will. I believe that most prices are sticky. Once they go up, they don't come down, whether it's machinery, labor, the insurances, for God's sakes. I don't see any of them coming down. Do you? Is there any bright spot there?
No, I don't see the cost of things like fertilizer, labor, equipment going down. That's where I think you need to reassess investment decisions.
Right. All right.
That's the softer cost you generally, I call them softer cost. It's not the ones you look at. When someone says to you, Damian, or, what do most farmers think about when they think about costs? They think of seed, fertilizer, chemicals, in certain parts of the world, labor, but they don't think about those other costs that you brought up. Insurance cost is through the roof. Labor cost, clearly, that's not coming down. You can pick just basic utility costs, your basic utility costs are not coming down. Do I see seed costs coming down? Yeah, maybe. It's actually a technology product now, right? And so look, when you buy a John Deere tractor, you ain't buying green and yellow paint with 4 wheels. You're buying technology, and that stuff's expensive, and it's not going to come down.
I agree, and I so that means again, your only option probably is either niche or expand to try and bring economies of scale into it. And I think the other one, if in your economic report, talked a lot about getting borrowed money, because obviously you're a bank, and I would say that it's time for an operation to really look at maximizing the return on any capital. There's a lot of machinery that sits around for all but 9 days a year. And, the factory I worked at and when I was putting myself through college didn't have a machine that got used 9 days a year, and I think that's going to be probably the next thing. So the report is called the 2026 U.S. Agricultural Economy Outlook. If you want to see this, if you want to get it, where do they get it, Miss Shelby?
You can get it on the AgAmerica website. We have a whole library of farm publications that are free resources for producers and landowners. And then we also have a newsletter that kind of notifies about any report. We do report summaries on our blog, and we can send that directly to your inbox. So
the website is
AgAmerica.com.
AgAmerica.com. She's Shelby Bass. He's Curt Covington. I'm Damian Mason. You heard a lot about this agriculture economy outlook. We're going to be covering it more because obviously it's front and center. And I think the real telling thing here is we're talking about 3 people that are pretty informed that get around the country quite a bit and even out of the country. And none of us see, unfortunately, some big, unicorns and rainbows by the end of the 2026. It's not going to happen. So you know what? Stay tuned to shows like this and do all you can to keep yourself sharp and keep your mind sharp about how you can better run your operation. And this is for everybody, because remember, as the farm income goes everybody else that works in this business, because it's all the same industry in that regard, whether you're the wherever you are in it, from the process goes. Anyway, check out these episodes. You know what? 440 episodes have been out, and one show comes out every Monday. Check out my awesome sponsors. Go to Nano Yield and check out their stuff. Harvest Returns, check out their stuff, and of course, Title Grow AgriScience. Till next time, I'm Damian Mason with my guests. Check out that report from AgAmerica. This is the business of agriculture. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Business of Agriculture. If you're planning a 2026 agricultural meeting or even getting a jump start on 2027, please consider putting me on stage. Almost 32 years now that I've been traveling around North America hopping on stage. If you put me on stage at your meeting, I promise I'll bring insights, outlook, and a dose of entertainment to help your people navigate a rapidly changing business of agriculture. Thank you so much for your consideration.